Marcus Chen adjusted his tactical vest for the third time in 10 minutes, the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders than any armor ever could. The observation deck of Station Kepler hummed with the constant thrum of recycled air and distant engine vibrations, while beyond the reinforced viewport, the swirling nebula of the Veil system painted space in shades of purple and gold.
"She's coming up now," announced Lieutenant Torres, her voice crackling through the comm unit. "Fair warning, Sergeant. The Princess isn't exactly what you'd call cooperative." Marcus suppressed a sigh.
3 tours of duty across the Outer Rim, countless diplomatic missions, and somehow he'd drawn the short straw for babysitting duty. The assignment briefing had been clear enough: escort Princess Zarathis of the Vellani Empire to the neutral moon of Epsilon 7 for the peace negotiations. Simple transport job, they said. What they hadn't mentioned was that the princess had specifically requested that no human be assigned to her security detail.
The docking bay doors hissed open, and Marcus got his first look at his charge. Princess Zarathis moved with the fluid grace typical of her species, but there was something different about her bearing, a tension that spoke of barely contained hostility.
She stood roughly 6 feet tall, her iridescent blue-silver skin catching the harsh station lighting in patterns that shifted like oil on water. 2 delicate antennae rose from her forehead, twitching with what Marcus had learned was usually a sign of agitation among the Vellani. Her retinue followed behind. 2 towering Vellani guards in ceremonial armor that looked more decorative than functional, and a thin, nervous-looking aide who kept glancing between his datapad and the princess, as if expecting either to spontaneously combust. "Your Highness?" Marcus stepped forward with a crisp salute.
"Sergeant Marcus Chen, Terran Defense Corps.
I'll be your escort to Epsilon 7.
The princess's large, luminous eyes, a shade of amber that seemed to glow from within, fixed on him with unmistakable disdain. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality common to her people, but the words themselves were sharp as crystal blades.
"I specifically requested no human involvement in my transport," she said, her Federation standard flawless despite the slight accent that made certain consonants sound like wind chimes. "Your species has proven unreliable in matters of delicate diplomacy." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks but kept his expression neutral. He'd heard variations of this sentiment before, usually from species that had tangled with human pirates or dealt with the more aggressive human colonies on the frontier. The Vellani, however, had a more specific grievance.
"I understand your concerns, Your Highness, but I assure you that you understand nothing." She cut him off, her antenna flattening against her skull in a display of clear irritation. "Your people bombarded 3 of our agricultural worlds just 2 years ago.
The Vanguard incident, I believe you call it. Rather clinical name for what amounted to genocide." The aide whispered something urgent in what Marcus assumed was the Vellani royal language, but the princess waved him off with one elegant hand. Marcus chose his words carefully. "The Vanguard incident was perpetrated by a rogue fleet that had broken from Terran command. They were disavowed and hunted down by human forces, yes," the princess interrupted again, "but only after they had destroyed 3 cities and killed 40,000 of my people. Tell me, Sergeant, how do you think the families of those victims feel about human reliability?" There wasn't much Marcus could say to that. The Vanguard incident remained a black mark on human military history, despite the efforts to distance the Terran Defense Corps from Admiral Carrick's breakaway fleet. The rogue admiral and his followers had been wiped out by human forces, but not before they'd carved a bloody swath through Vellani space.
"I can't speak for the actions of criminals and traitors, Your Highness," Marcus said finally. "I can only offer my word that your safety is my highest priority." Princess Zarathis studied him for a long moment, her amber eyes seeming to pierce right through him. Finally, she turned to her aide. "Morvek, what are our alternatives?" The aide, Morvek, consulted his datapad with trembling fingers. "Your Highness, the departure window for Epsilon 7 closes in 3 hours. If we delay further, the negotiations begin in 4 days," the princess finished, "and my father expects me there to represent our interests." She looked back at Marcus, her expression one of resigned disgust. "Very well, Sergeant, but understand this, I will be watching you. One suspicious move, one sign that you're anything like your murderous compatriots, and I will have you spaced," Marcus nodded. "Understood, Your Highness." The journey to the transport ship was tense.
with the princess maintaining a careful distance from Marcus while her guards flanked her protectively. The ship itself was a sleek Terran diplomatic vessel, the Meridian, designed for comfort and speed rather than combat. Marcus had already reviewed its specifications. Capable of faster-than-light travel, moderate defensive systems, and enough luxury amenities to keep even royal passengers comfortable during the 3-day journey to Epsilon 7. Captain Rodriguez greeted them at the airlock, his weathered face creased with years of diplomatic missions. "Your Highness, welcome aboard the Meridian. We're honored to have you." The princess acknowledged him with a slight nod but said nothing. Marcus could practically feel the frost radiating from her as they made their way to the passenger compartments. "Your quarters are here, Your Highness." Marcus indicated the largest suite. "Your guards and aide have the adjoining rooms." "I'll be stationed where?" she demanded. "The security station is just down the corridor, where I can monitor ship systems and maintain watch rotations." "Too close," the princess said flatly. "I want you on the opposite end of the ship." Marcus felt his jaw tighten but forced himself to remain professional. "Your Highness, standard protocol requires close protection, especially given the current tensions in this sector." "What tensions?" she asked, her antennae rising slightly. Marcus glanced at Captain Rodriguez, who nodded permission to brief the passengers. "Long-range sensors have detected increased pirate activity in the drift. The asteroid field we'll need to navigate to reach Epsilon 7. Nothing that should threaten a ship like the Meridian, but we want to be prepared." The princess's expression shifted slightly, though whether from concern or calculation, Marcus couldn't tell. "Pirates," she said thoughtfully. "Human pirates? Unknown," Marcus admitted. "Could be anyone." "The drift has always been a haven for criminals of all species." "How convenient," the princess said, her tone laden with suspicion. "A human escort, human pirates, and a conveniently isolated route where anything might happen." Marcus felt his temper flare despite his training. "Your Highness, if you're suggesting that I'm part of some conspiracy—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Sergeant," she replied coolly. "I'm simply noting the interesting coincidences." She turned to her guards. "Corvash, Thalon, I want one of you awake at all times. Full armor, weapons ready." The two guards who had remained silent throughout the exchange straightened to attention. "Yes, Your Highness," they said in unison. As the princess and her retinue disappeared into their quarters, Marcus found himself alone in the corridor with Captain Rodriguez. "Cheerful one, isn't she?" the captain muttered. "Can't say I blame her," Marcus replied, though the words left a bitter taste in his mouth. "The Vanguard incident hit the Volani hard. Trust doesn't come easy after something like that." "Maybe not," Rodriguez said. "But you weren't part of Carrick's fleet. You were fighting the Skarn on the other side of the galaxy when that happened." Marcus nodded. The Skarn War had been his first deployment, a brutal campaign against insectoid aliens who had tried to establish breeding colonies in human space. By the time news of the Vanguard incident had reached the front lines, Admiral Carrick and his rogue fleet were already dead, wiped out by a joint Terran-Volani task force. "Doesn't matter what I was doing," Marcus said. "To her, I'm human and humans can't be trusted. That's all there is to it." The next 2 days passed in tense silence. Marcus maintained his professional duties, coordinating with the ship's security systems and monitoring communications traffic, but the princess made it clear that his presence was unwelcome. She took her meals in her quarters, refused all attempts at conversation, and generally treated him like a necessary evil to be endured. Her guards weren't much better. Corvash and Thalon were professionals, Marcus had to admit, but they watched him with the same suspicious vigilance they might show a potential assassin. Every time he approached the passenger section, one of them would materialize to shadow his movements. It was during the 3rd day, as they approached the outer edge of the drift, that things began to go wrong. "Sergeant Chen to the bridge." Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom, carrying an edge of tension that made Marcus's instincts prickle. He found Rodriguez bent over the sensor display, his expression grim. "What's the situation, Captain?" "Long-range sensors are picking up multiple contacts in the drift," Rodriguez said. 12 ships configured in a hunting formation. They're not broadcasting any identification signals." Marcus studied the display. The ships were positioned to intercept any vessel attempting to navigate the drift, a classic pirate ambush formation. Can we go around? Negative. The drift extends for several light years in either direction, and we don't have the fuel for that kind of detour. Plus, our departure schedule was calculated down to the hour. If we're late to Epsilon 7, Marcus nodded grimly. The peace negotiations were delicately timed, with representatives from dozens of species converging on the neutral moon. Late arrivals would be seen as a sign of disrespect or worse, an indication that the Volani Empire wasn't serious about peace. Can we fight our way through? Marcus asked. Rodriguez shook his head. The Meridian has defensive systems, but we're a diplomatic vessel, not a warship. Against 12 pirates? We wouldn't last 10 minutes. What about calling for help? Already tried. We're too far from any Terran patrol routes, and even if we could reach someone, they wouldn't arrive for hours. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Princess Zarathis was his charge, and her safety was his primary concern. But as he stared at the sensor display, he couldn't shake the feeling that the princess's suspicions might not be entirely unfounded. The timing was awfully convenient. "Captain, I need to inform the princess of the situation," Marcus said. "Agreed. We may need to consider alternative options." Marcus made his way to the passenger section, his mind racing through possibilities. As he approached the princess's quarters, he found Corvash standing guard outside the door. "I need to speak with Her Highness," Marcus said. The guard's mandibles clicked together, a sign of agitation among the Volani. "The princess has given orders not to be disturbed." "This is a security emergency," Marcus insisted. "We've encountered potential hostiles." Corvash hesitated, then knocked on the door. "Your Highness, the human requests an audience. He claims there is danger." The door hissed open, revealing Princess Zarathis in a flowing robe that seemed to shift colors as she moved, her amber eyes fixed on Marcus with their usual hostility, but he could see a flicker of genuine concern beneath. "What kind of danger?" she demanded. "Pirates, Your Highness. 12 ships positioned to intercept us as we enter the drift. We're outnumbered and outgunned." The princess's antennae flattened against her skull. "How convenient." "And what do you propose we do about these pirates?" Marcus took a deep breath. "We have options, but none of them are good. We can try to negotiate safe passage, though pirates aren't known for their reason. We can attempt to evade them, though the odds of success are low. Or we can fight. The Meridian has defensive systems, and I have combat experience. It's not ideal, but it might be our only choice." The princess stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice cold and measured. "Tell me, Sergeant, what are the odds that these pirates are working with you?" Marcus felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. "Your Highness, I give you my word." "Your word," she interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "The word of a human. The same species that murdered 40,000 of my people." "I am not them," Marcus said, his own voice rising despite his efforts to maintain control. "I've spent my entire career protecting innocent lives, regardless of their species. I've bled for the Federation, lost friends defending worlds that weren't even human. I don't expect you to trust me because I'm asking you to, but because my actions speak louder than the crimes of others." The princess studied him intently, her amber eyes seeming to peer into his very soul. Around them, the ship shuddered slightly as Captain Rodriguez began evasive maneuvers. "Your Highness," Morvek spoke up from behind her, his voice trembling. "The negotiations. If we're delayed or killed." "I know what's at stake," the princess snapped. She looked back at Marcus. "Very well, Sergeant. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. For now. What do you recommend?" Marcus felt a surge of relief mixed with determination. "First, we need to get you and your people to the most secure part of the ship. Then we prepare for the worst-case scenario." As if summoned by his words, the ship's collision alarms began to wail, and Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed through the corridors. "All hands, brace for combat. Unknown vessels are moving to intercept." The princess's eyes met Marcus's, and for the first time since they'd met, he saw something other than hatred in their amber depths. He saw fear. And in that moment, Marcus Chen made a silent promise. Whatever it took, whoever these pirates were,
He would see Princess Zarathis safely to Epsilon 7, not because it was his duty, though it was, not because he was ordered to, though he had been, but because, despite her hatred for his species, she was an innocent person in danger, and that was something Marcus Chen would never let stand. The battle for the Meridian was about to begin. A human tasked with escorting an alien girl who loathed him, but fate had other plans, .. Part 2. The bridge of the Meridian had transformed from a place of quiet efficiency into a storm of urgent activity. Marcus burst through the doors to find Captain Rodriguez barking orders at his crew, while the main display showed 12 hostile contacts converging on their position like sharks sensing blood in the water. "Status report," Marcus demanded, taking his position at the tactical console. "They've got us boxed in," Rodriguez replied grimly. 3 heavy cruisers, 6 fighters, and what looks like 3 boarding ships. Professional setup. These aren't your typical pirates. Marcus studied the display, his tactical training kicking in. The enemy formation was too precise, too coordinated for a ragtag band of criminals. Someone with military experience was commanding this force. "Incoming transmission," announced Ensign Kim from the communication station. "Put it through," Rodriguez ordered. The main screen flickered, revealing a face that made Marcus's blood run cold. The man appeared human, with graying hair and cybernetic implants covering the left side of his face. But it was the uniform that made Marcus's stomach clench, the distinctive black and gold of Admiral Carrick's rogue fleet. "Well, well," the man said, his voice carrying a cultured accent that somehow made his words more menacing. "The diplomatic vessel, Meridian. How fortuitous. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Corps." Rodriguez replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "You are interfering with a diplomatic mission under Federation protection. Stand down immediately." The man laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "I am Commander Voss, formerly of the Terran Navy, currently serving a more enlightened cause. And you, Captain, are carrying something that belongs to my associates." Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. "The princess," he muttered. Voss's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the camera. "Ah, someone has figured it out. Yes, Princess Zarathis. Such a valuable young woman. I'm sure her father would pay handsomely for her safe return." "Over my dead body," Rodriguez snarled. "That can certainly be arranged," Voss replied smoothly. "You have 2 options, Captain. Surrender the princess and her retinue, and the rest of you may continue to Epsilon 7 with an interesting story to tell. Refuse, and we'll take her from the wreckage of your ship." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. "Sir," Ensign Kim spoke up, "they're charging weapons." Marcus was already moving toward the door. "I need to get to the princess. If they're planning a boarding action..." "Sergeant." Rodriguez's voice stopped him. "What do you think our chances are?" Marcus paused, running the calculations in his head. A diplomatic vessel against 12 military-grade ships, crewed by experienced rogue veterans. Honestly, we're probably all dead. "That's what I thought," Rodriguez said grimly. "But we're not giving up that princess without a fight." Marcus nodded and sprinted from the bridge. Behind him, he could hear Rodriguez issuing orders for evasive maneuvers and defensive preparations. The passenger section seemed eerily quiet after the chaos of the bridge. Marcus found the princess and her retinue in the main lounge, with Korvash and Thalon standing guard while Morvek frantically worked at a portable communication device. "Your Highness," Marcus called out as he approached. "We need to move you to a more secure location." Princess Zarathis rose from her seat, her composure intact despite the circumstances. "Let me guess. Your pirate friends have decided to show their hand?" "They're not my friends," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "But you were right about one thing. They're definitely after you specifically." The princess's antennae twitched with what might have been surprise. "You admit I was correct?" "I admit the situation looks suspicious as hell," Marcus replied. "But right now we have bigger problems. These aren't ordinary pirates. They're military veterans, probably from Carrick's fleet. They want to ransom you back to your father." "Impossible," Morvek squeaked.
looking up from his device. Carrick's fleet was destroyed 2 years ago. Apparently not all of it, Marcus said grimly. Some of them must have scattered, gone underground. Your Highness, we need to get you to the ship's safe room. It's designed to withstand. The ship shuddered violently as enemy fire began impacting their shields. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power grid fluctuated under the assault. That's our cue, Marcus said, drawing his sidearm. Everyone move. Now. They made their way through the ship's corridors as the Meridian bucked and rolled under enemy fire. Marcus took point, with the princess behind him and her guards bringing up the rear. The safe room was located in the ship's most protected section, surrounded by armor plating and equipped with independent life support. They were halfway there when the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness broken only by the red glow of emergency strips along the floor. They've knocked out our main power, Marcus said, activating a light attached to his weapon. Stay close. In the crimson-tinted darkness, Princess Zarathis looked like a figure from a nightmare, her iridescent skin gleaming like oil and her amber eyes reflecting the light like those of some nocturnal predator. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. Sergeant, these former military personnel, they would have detailed intelligence about Terran ship designs, wouldn't they? Marcus felt his blood chill as the implication hit him. They'd know about the safe room. As if summoned by his words, the distinctive whine of cutting torches echoed through the ship's hull. The enemy was already beginning their boarding operation. New plan, Marcus said, his mind racing. We can't hide from them. They know this ship too well. We need to get to the shuttle bay. The shuttles were disabled during the initial attack, Corvash rumbled, speaking for the first time since Marcus had met him. His voice was deep and resonant, like distant thunder. Not disabled, Marcus corrected. Just powered down to avoid being targeted. The emergency systems should still be functional. They changed direction, making their way toward the shuttle bay as the sounds of the boarding operation grew closer. Marcus could hear the distinctive hiss of atmosphere equalizing as airlocks were breached. Multiple contacts entering the ship. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the emergency communication system. All security personnel to defensive positions. The shuttle bay was in darkness when they arrived, the 2 emergency shuttles sitting like sleeping giants in their docking cradles. Marcus quickly made his way to the nearest one, a compact but fast vessel designed for diplomatic courier runs. Can you operate one of these? He asked the princess. She looked insulted. I am trained in the operation of all standard Federation vessel types. Unlike some species, the Villani believe in practical education for our nobility. Good, Marcus said, beginning the startup sequence, because I might be a little busy keeping the boarding parties away from us. The shuttle systems came online with agonizing slowness. Marcus found himself silently cursing the safety protocols that required extensive system checks before the craft could be launched. Contacts approaching the shuttle bay, Thalen reported, his weapon raised and ready. Marcus looked at the tactical display showing the shuttle's startup progress. 30 more seconds. We may not have 30 seconds, the princess said, moving to the shuttle's co-pilot seat. Her fingers danced across the controls with practiced precision. There, I've bypassed the safety protocols. We can launch now, but the weapons systems are still offline. Weapons won't matter against 12 warships, Marcus said. But speed might. The shuttle bay doors were beginning to open when the first boarding party burst through the entrance. Marcus counted at least 8 figures in combat armor, moving with military precision. Go, go, go! Marcus shouted, firing several shots to drive the boarders to cover. The shuttle lifted off with a roar of engines, shooting through the opening bay doors into space. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the Meridian surrounded by enemy vessels, her hull scarred and smoking from multiple impacts. They're launching fighters to intercept us, the princess reported from the co-pilot's position. Marcus threw the shuttle into a series of evasive maneuvers, weaving between the larger enemy ships while enemy fighters closed in from all sides. The little craft shook under the stress of high turns, but her engines held. Can this vessel make the jump to faster-than-light travel? Corvash asked from behind them. Not without a nav computer lock on our destination, Marcus replied, rolling the shuttle to avoid a stream of enemy fire. And we need at least 30 seconds of straight-line flight for the FTL drive to engage. 30 seconds we don't have, the princess observed as enemy fighters closed in from 3 directions. Marcus gritted his teeth and pushed the shuttle's engines to their maximum output. The ship shot forward like a bullet, racing toward the edge of the drift's asteroid field. If they could reach the dense asteroid clusters, they might be able to lose their pursuers in the maze of floating rock. "They're gaining on us," Morvek whimpered from his seat. Marcus didn't reply, too focused on threading the shuttle through the increasingly dense asteroid field. The enemy fighters were faster, but they were also larger and less maneuverable. In the tight confines of the asteroid field, that might give the shuttle an advantage. An enemy fighter exploded against an asteroid, its pilot unable to match the tight turn Marcus had just executed. That left 5 still pursuing them. "There," the princess said suddenly, pointing at the tactical display. "That asteroid. It's hollow." Marcus looked where she indicated and saw what appeared to be a natural cave formation in one of the larger asteroids. It was barely big enough for the shuttle, but if they could reach it— "Hold on," he warned, then threw the shuttle into a spiraling dive toward the asteroid. The enemy fighters followed, their weapons fire lighting up space around the fleeing shuttle. Marcus felt the ship shudder as several shots found their mark, but the little craft's shields held. At the last possible moment, Marcus pulled the shuttle into the cave opening, the ship's hull scraping against rock walls as they disappeared into the asteroid's interior. "Are they following us?" Marcus asked, unable to see the tactical display from his position. "No," the princess replied. "They're circling the asteroid, but the opening is too narrow for their fighters." Marcus allowed himself a moment of relief, then began assessing their situation. "Damage report? Shields are down to 30%, but all major systems are functional," the princess reported. "However, we have another problem." "What now?" "Oxygen. The ship's life support was damaged in the attack. At current consumption rates, we have perhaps 6 hours of breathable atmosphere remaining." Marcus felt his heart sink. 6 hours might be enough to reach Epsilon 7 if they could evade the enemy fleet, but they were trapped in an asteroid with limited air and no way to call for help. "Can we repair the life support?" he asked. Thalon spoke up from the rear of the shuttle. "I have some technical training. I could attempt repairs, but I would need access to the external hull." "In spacesuits," Marcus said grimly, "while those fighters are still out there." The princess was studying the sensor readouts. The enemy vessels appear to be taking up positions around this asteroid cluster. "They're waiting for us to emerge." "So we wait them out," Marcus said. "Eventually, they'll have to leave to refuel or—" "No," the princess interrupted. "Look at the formation. This isn't a temporary blockade. They're settling in for a siege." Marcus studied the tactical display and realized she was right. The enemy fleet had arranged themselves to cover all possible escape routes from the asteroid field. They could afford to wait. Time was on their side. "Then we need another option," Marcus said. The princess turned to look at him directly, her amber eyes unreadable in the shuttle's dim lighting. "There is one possibility, but it would require a considerable risk. I'm listening." "The life support on this shuttle can be extended if we reduce the number of people breathing the available air." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the shuttle's failing environmental systems. "You're suggesting someone stays behind." "I'm suggesting," the princess said carefully, "that the person most likely to be working with the enemy should be the one to make the sacrifice." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Marcus felt the eyes of the Volani guards on him, their weapons within easy reach. "You still think I'm working with them," he said quietly. "The evidence is circumstantial but compelling," the princess replied. "A human escort, human enemies, and a conveniently isolated location where any number of accidents might occur." Marcus looked around the cramped shuttle at the faces surrounding him. Morvek appeared terrified, the guards suspicious, and the princess coolly analytical. He was outnumbered 4-1, and his weapon was holstered. But instead of reaching for his gun, Marcus began unfastening his equipment harness. "What are you doing?" the princess asked sharply. "What needs to be done?" Marcus replied, setting aside his weapon and emergency supplies. "You're right about the air situation. Someone needs to stay behind, and I'm the logical choice." "You're confessing?" she asked, her antennae rising in what might have been surprise. "I'm accepting responsibility," Marcus corrected. Whether I'm guilty of conspiracy or just guilty of being human in the wrong place at the wrong time, the result is the same. You need to reach Epsilon 7, and I'm the expendable member of this group." The princess stared at him for a long moment, her expression shifting through what Marcus interpreted as confusion, suspicion, and something that might have been respect. "That is," she said slowly, "not what I expected you to say." "What did you expect?" "Denials, protests. Perhaps an attempt to throw suspicion on my guards or aid." Marcus shrugged. "What would be the point? You've already made up your mind about me." He moved toward the shuttle's airlock, but the princess's voice stopped him. "Wait." Marcus turned back to find her studying him with those piercing amber eyes. "If you were truly working with the enemy," she said thoughtfully, "this would be the perfect opportunity to eliminate me and my retinue. A shuttle accident in an asteroid field. Very convenient." "Maybe I'm just a really bad traitor," Marcus suggested dryly. The princess almost smiled at that. "Almost. Perhaps," she said. "Or perhaps I have been allowing past grievances to cloud my judgment of present circumstances." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding from the shuttle's sensor array. The princess quickly checked the displays, her expression growing grave. "The enemy fleet is moving," she reported. "They're starting to systematically search each asteroid in this cluster." "How long until they reach us?" Marcus asked. "Perhaps 2 hours." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again. 2 hours to find a way out of this situation, with limited air, a damaged shuttle, and an enemy fleet that wanted to capture the one person he'd sworn to protect. "Your Highness," he said formally, "I propose a temporary truce. Whatever you think of me personally, we both want the same thing right now. To get you to those peace negotiations alive." The princess considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Agreed, Sergeant Chen, a temporary truce." As the enemy fleet drew closer to their hiding place, Marcus found himself wondering if he would live long enough to prove his innocence to the alien princess who held his honor in her elegant, deadly hands, as a human tasked with escorting an alien girl who loathed him. But fate had other plans, ##. Part 3. The asteroid cave felt like a tomb as the enemy search pattern drew closer to their hiding place. Marcus worked frantically at the shuttle's engineering console, trying to find some way to extend their meager air supply while Princess Zarathis monitored the approaching fleet. The tension in the cramped space was thick enough to cut with a blade. "They're scanning each asteroid methodically," the princess reported, her voice tight with control. "At their current pace, they'll reach us within 90 minutes. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead and continued his work. The shuttle's life support system had been damaged by enemy fire, and jury-rigging repairs in their current situation was like trying to perform surgery in a coffin. "I can buy us maybe another hour of air if I reroute power from non-essential systems. Will that be enough?" Morvek asked nervously, his delicate features pale with fear. "No," Marcus admitted, "not unless we can find another way out of this mess." Thalon, the larger of the two Villani guards, had been studying the asteroid cave's dimensions on the geological scanner. "There may be another option," he rumbled. "This formation shows multiple passages leading deeper into the asteroid. Some appear to connect to other cave systems." The princess moved to examine the scanner display. "You're suggesting we go deeper underground? The shuttle's engines could propel us through the larger passages," Thalon continued. "If we could reach the far side of the asteroid without the enemy detecting us," Marcus considered the proposal. "It's possible, but incredibly dangerous. These caves weren't designed for spacecraft navigation. One wrong turn and we'll be permanent residents." "As opposed to being captured or suffocating?" the princess asked dryly. Marcus couldn't argue with that logic. "Let me check the structural integrity scans." As he worked, the princess moved to stand beside him at the console. This close, Marcus could smell the subtle floral scent that seemed to emanate from her iridescent skin, and he found himself momentarily distracted by the graceful way she moved. "Sergeant," she said quietly, so the others couldn't hear, "why did you volunteer to stay behind earlier?" Marcus paused in his work to look at her. "Because it was the right thing to do. Even though you believe I've misjudged you. Especially because of that," Marcus replied. "Someone has to break the cycle sometime." The princess studied his face intently. "The cycle?" Humans do something terrible, aliens learn to distrust humans, humans become defensive and angry, more terrible things happen, Marcus explained. It's been going on for decades. Maybe if one of us is willing to take the first step, even if that step costs your life? Marcus shrugged. I'm a soldier. Risk comes with the job description. Before the princess could respond, alarms began shrieking from the sensor array. Contact, Corvash called out. Enemy scanner sweep is approaching our position. Marcus threw himself back into his work, activating the shuttle's stealth systems and shutting down all non-essential equipment. The little craft went dark and quiet, its occupants holding their breath as an enemy destroyer passed slowly by their hiding place. For 5 agonizing minutes, they waited in silence while the enemy ship's sensors probed the asteroid. Finally, the destroyer moved on to scan the next target in its search pattern. Clear, Corvash whispered. Marcus allowed himself to breathe again. That was too close. We need to move before they circle back. He activated the shuttle's maneuvering thrusters, using minimal power to ease the craft deeper into the asteroid's cave system. The passages were narrow and twisted, barely wide enough for their small vessel, and Marcus found himself flying by instruments alone as they penetrated deeper into the rock. Temperatures rising, the princess observed from the co-pilot's seat. We must be approaching the asteroid's core. As long as it's not molten, we should be fine, Marcus said, though privately he was beginning to wonder if they were trading one death trap for another. The passage opened into a larger cavern, and Marcus allowed himself a moment of relief. They'd made it through the worst of the navigation challenges, and according to the geological scanner, they were now roughly in the center of the asteroid. That's when the ceiling collapsed. The asteroid shook as if struck by a giant hammer, sending chunks of rock cascading down around the shuttle. Marcus threw the engines into reverse thrust, but it was too late. Several massive boulders crashed down, blocking their retreat path. What happened? Morvek squeaked, his voice high with panic. Marcus checked the sensor readings and felt his heart sink. Enemy weapons fire. They're blasting apart the asteroids they've already searched. To prevent us from doubling back, the princess said grimly. Intelligent. Another tremor shook their hiding place, and more debris rained down. Marcus realized with growing dread that they were trapped between the collapsed tunnel behind them and the unknown passages ahead. Forward is our only option now, he announced. As they navigated deeper into the asteroid, Marcus found himself stealing glances at the princess. Despite their desperate situation, she remained calm and focused, her elegant hands dancing across the co-pilot controls with practiced precision. He was beginning to understand why the Volani had chosen her to represent them in the peace negotiations. Can I ask you something, Your Highness? Marcus said as they emerged into another large cavern. You may ask, she replied carefully. Why are these negotiations so important to you? I mean, personally? The princess was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes distant. Because the alternative is war, she said finally, and war with the Human Federation would destroy both our peoples, even after what happened to your agricultural worlds. Her antennae flattened against her skull, a sign of emotional distress. Those worlds, one of them was my grandmother's birthplace. 60,000 people lived there, tending gardens that had been cultivated for 3 centuries. In a single day, your rogue admiral turned it into a wasteland. Marcus felt a stab of guilt, even though he'd had nothing to do with the atrocity. I'm sorry. Are you? Or are you simply saying what you think I want to hear? Marcus considered his words carefully. I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry innocent people died. And I'm sorry that my species has members capable of such evil. But you don't feel personally responsible? Should I? I was fighting the Skarn when Carrick went rogue. I've never even been to Volani space until this mission. The princess turned to study him directly. And yet, when my people see a human in uniform, they think of burning cities and screaming children. How do you reconcile that? Marcus maneuvered the shuttle around a cluster of crystalline formations that glittered like frozen stars in the ship's lights. The same way you reconcile representing your people in peace talks with humans, I imagine. By believing that the future can be different from the past. An optimistic philosophy. The only alternative is giving up, They emerged from the crystal cavern into a passage that seemed to stretch on end. The shuttle's lights illuminated smooth walls that looked almost artificial, as if carved by intelligent design rather than natural forces. These formations are unusual, the princess observed, studying the geological readings. Before Marcus could respond, the passage opened into a vast chamber that took his breath away. They had discovered a hollow space at the heart of the asteroid, and it was clearly artificial. Delicate structures that might once have been buildings rose from the chamber floor, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift in the shuttle's lights. "By the 7 stars," Morvek whispered. "It's a city. An ancient one by the look of it," the princess added, her scientific training evident in her tone. These could be predecessor ruins. The predecessors were a mystery that had puzzled xenoarchaeologists for decades. Evidence of an ancient, advanced civilization that had vanished long before any of the current spacefaring races had developed interstellar travel. Marcus guided the shuttle into the ancient city, weaving between structures that towered impossibly high for such an environment. This discovery alone could change everything we know about galactic history, if we survive to report it, the princess said practically. They found a landing area near what appeared to be the city's center, where a large structure dominated the surrounding buildings. The shuttle settled onto the ancient pavement with a soft thud, and Marcus began running diagnostics. "Air's getting thin," he reported. "We've got maybe 2 hours left." "Is the atmosphere outside breathable?" the princess asked. Marcus checked the external sensors. "There's an atmosphere, but it's too thin and the wrong composition. We'd need suits to explore." "Which we don't have," Corvash pointed out grimly. Marcus was about to agree when an idea struck him. "Wait. The shuttle's emergency protocols include temporary atmospheric modification. If I can rig the external air recyclers to work in reverse..." He began working frantically at the engineering controls, trying to implement a plan that was probably impossible. The idea was to use the shuttle's systems to create a breathable atmosphere in the immediate area, essentially turning the ancient landing pad into a temporary habitat. "You want to terraform a pocket of alien real estate?" the princess asked, her tone somewhere between disbelief and admiration. "More like atmospheric modification on a very small scale," Marcus corrected. "And only temporarily. But it might buy us enough time to explore this place and maybe find another way out." As he worked, the princess moved to the shuttle's archaeological scanner, studying the ancient city with obvious fascination. "These readings are extraordinary. The construction materials include alloys we've never seen before, and the power signatures suggest some kind of energy source is still active after all this time." "Active how?" Marcus asked. "Unknown. But there are definitely power conduits running throughout the city, and they appear to be feeding into that central structure." Marcus completed his modifications and activated the atmospheric processor. Slowly, the air outside began to change, becoming thicker and more oxygen-rich. It was a temporary solution at best. The modified atmosphere would dissipate within a few hours, but it was better than suffocating in the shuttle. "It's working," he announced. "The atmosphere outside should be breathable now. At least for a while." They made their way out of the shuttle and into the ancient city. The gravity was lighter than normal, making their movements feel dreamlike as they walked between towering structures covered in indecipherable alien script. "The artistry is incredible," the princess said, running her hand along one of the carved walls. "Look at the detail in these reliefs." Marcus found himself watching her instead of the architecture. Here, in this impossible place, Princess Zarathis seemed different, less guarded, more human, for lack of a better word. Her scientific curiosity had overcome her political caution, and he glimpsed the person she might be without the weight of royal responsibility. They approached the central structure, which rose like a crystalline mountain from the heart of the ancient city. Its surface was covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and Marcus could feel a subtle vibration in the air, as if the building itself was humming with barely contained energy. There, Morvek pointed to what appeared to be an entrance. "Those symbols, they're similar to some found at other predecessor sites." As they approached the entrance, the symbols suddenly flared with brilliant light, and the massive doors began to slide open with a sound like distant thunder. "I don't suppose anyone else finds this ominous?" Marcus asked. "Terrifying," the princess agreed. "But also fascinating. We may be the first living beings to enter this place in millennia." They stepped across the threshold into a corridor that stretched away into darkness.
The walls were lined with more of the pulsing symbols, providing enough light to see by, and the air carried a strange, ozone-like scent. "Energy readings are off the charts," the princess reported, consulting a handheld scanner. "Whatever powers this place, it's incredibly sophisticated." They walked for what felt like hours through corridors and chambers filled with incomprehensible alien technology. Some rooms contained massive crystalline formations that hummed with power, while others held devices that might have been computers, artwork, or something entirely beyond their understanding. It was in the deepest chamber that they found it. The room was circular, with walls that curved up into darkness high above. At the center stood a pillar of what looked like liquid light, stretching from floor to invisible ceiling. Around it, holographic displays showed star charts, mathematical equations, and symbols that hurt to look at directly. "It's a navigation system," the princess said in wonder. "Or perhaps a record of some kind. These star charts, they show the entire galaxy." Marcus approached one of the displays, trying to make sense of the alien information. "Can you read any of this?" "Some of it. The mathematical concepts are universal. And these star positions, if I'm reading this correctly, this map shows stellar positions from roughly 50,000 years ago." As they studied the ancient star charts, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. "Your Highness, look at this section here. Doesn't that look familiar?" The princess followed his gaze and gasped. "The Veil System. That's where we were attacked. And look at this." Marcus pointed to another section of the display. Epsilon 7. This map shows a direct route between the two systems, a route that completely bypasses the drift. But that's impossible. There's no stable hyperspace corridor between those systems. There wasn't 50,000 years ago either, according to this map, Marcus said grimly. But the predecessors apparently found a way to create one. Before the princess could respond, the entire chamber began to vibrate with increasing intensity. The liquid light pillar pulsed brighter, and new holographic displays appeared around them. "Warning." A voice spoke in perfect Federation standard, though it carried an alien intonation that made the hair on Marcus's neck stand up. "Unauthorized vessels detected in proximity to restricted archaeological site. Defensive measures will be implemented in 60 seconds. Marcus grabbed the princess's hand. "We need to leave. Now." They ran through the ancient corridors as the building's defensive systems began to activate around them. Panels slid aside to reveal weapons that Marcus couldn't even begin to identify, and the air itself seemed to crackle with dangerous energy. They burst out of the central structure just as it unleashed its first salvo. Not at them, but at something high above. Through the thin atmosphere of the asteroid's core, Marcus could see brilliant flashes of light as the ancient weapons engaged targets in space. "The enemy fleet," the princess said, understanding immediately. "The predecessors' automated defenses are attacking them." They made it back to the shuttle as the ancient city came fully alive around them. Weapon emplacements rose from buildings that had seemed decorative, and beams of coherent energy reached up through the asteroid's crust to strike at ships in orbit. Marcus got the shuttle airborne just as a section of the city erupted in defensive fire. Through the chaos, he could see that the predecessors' weapons were devastatingly effective. The enemy fleet was already in full retreat, their ships badly damaged. "There," the princess pointed to a new opening in the asteroid's surface. "The weapons fire has created an exit passage." Marcus piloted the shuttle toward the opening, weaving between automated weapon systems that ignored them in favor of the retreating enemy ships. They emerged from the asteroid into space to find the enemy fleet in full retreat, several ships burning and adrift. "Set course for Epsilon 7. The princess ordered. "Maximum speed." As the shuttle's FTL drive engaged, Marcus found himself looking back at the asteroid that had nearly been their tomb. Already it was returning to dormancy, the weapons retracting and the energy signatures fading. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "what we found back there will remain between us for now," she interrupted. "The implications are too staggering to reveal without careful consideration." Marcus nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. The discovery of active predecessor technology would reshape galactic politics in ways that were impossible to predict. "There is one thing, however," the princess continued, her amber eyes meeting his. "Your actions in that place, they were not those of someone working with our enemies. Does that mean you're starting to trust me?" The princess was quiet for a long moment,
her expression thoughtful. It means I'm beginning to realize that I may have allowed my prejudices to cloud my judgment. As their shuttle raced toward Epsilon 7 and the peace negotiations that would determine the future of two species, Marcus found himself hoping that the princess's growing trust was not misplaced, because something told him that their real trials were just beginning. A human tasked with escorting an alien girl who loathed him. But fate had other plans. ##. Part 4 Epsilon 7 hung in space like a pearl against black velvet, its carefully maintained atmosphere and strategic location making it the perfect neutral ground for galactic diplomacy. As their shuttle approached the orbital station, Marcus felt the weight of their recent discoveries pressing on his mind like a physical burden. "Traffic control to diplomatic shuttle Meridian 7, came the crisp voice of the station's flight controller. "You're cleared for docking bay 12. Please be advised that you're arriving 6 hours behind schedule." Marcus keyed the communicator. "Acknowledged control. We encountered delays en route." That was certainly one way to describe being attacked by pirates, trapped in an asteroid and discovering an active predecessor city, he thought grimly. The princess had been unusually quiet during the final hours of their journey, spending most of her time reviewing diplomatic files and preparing for the negotiations ahead. Her transformation from the hostile alien who had originally refused his protection to this focused, determined leader was remarkable to witness. As they docked with Epsilon 7, Marcus couldn't help but notice the impressive array of ships already present. Vessels from dozens of different species filled the station's numerous bays, representing governments, trade unions, and independent systems from across the galaxy. "Quite a gathering," Morvek observed nervously, peering through the shuttle's viewports at the alien ships surrounding them. "The largest diplomatic conference in 50 years, the princess replied, "and the most important. These negotiations will either establish a lasting framework for peace or set the stage for a war that could consume half the galaxy." Unquote. They disembarked into a bustling corridor filled with beings of every conceivable shape and size. Marcus found himself automatically cataloging potential threats, a habit from years of security work, but the station's own peacekeeping force was clearly visible and well-trained. "Sergeant Chen," the princess said as they walked toward the diplomatic quarters, "I'll need you to coordinate with station security regarding my protection during the negotiations." "Of course, Your Highness. What about the information we discovered? Shouldn't the Terran delegation be briefed on the predecessor site?" The princess paused, her antennae twitching thoughtfully. "That knowledge is too dangerous to reveal carelessly. For now, we keep it between us." Marcus nodded, though he had his own doubts about the wisdom of withholding such momentous information. The discovery of active predecessor technology could change everything, or it could start a war as various factions fought to claim it. They were approaching the Volani diplomatic suite when Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Among the station personnel directing traffic and managing security, he spotted a familiar face. One of the boarding party members from the pirate attack. The man was dressed in station security uniform and appeared to be legitimately assigned to the peacekeeping force, but Marcus was certain he'd seen that scarred face through his weapon's scope during their escape from the Meridian. "Your Highness," Marcus said quietly, moving closer to the princess, "we may have a problem." Before he could elaborate, the Volani delegation's quarters came into view, and Marcus saw a figure that made his heart skip a beat. A tall human in the uniform of a Terran diplomatic officer was waiting for them. His silver hair and cybernetic implants immediately recognizable. Commander Voss smiled as they approached, his expression one of polite diplomatic courtesy rather than the menacing threat he'd shown during the pirate attack. "Your Highness," Voss said with a respectful bow, "I am Commander Voss, attached to the Terran diplomatic mission as a security liaison. I trust your journey was eventful?" The princess's composure never wavered, though Marcus could see the slight flattening of her antennae that indicated stress. "Commander, yes, we encountered some difficulties en route. Pirates, I understand," Voss said sympathetically. "Such a shame that criminal elements continue to plague the space lanes. I do hope you weren't seriously inconvenienced." Marcus felt his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon, but the princess's subtle gesture stopped him. They were in a public space, surrounded by diplomats and peacekeepers. Any violent action would be seen as an attack on the peace process itself. "We managed to overcome the difficulties," the princess replied smoothly. "Though I believe my escort deserves considerable credit for ensuring our safe arrival." Voss's cybernetic eye fixed on Marcus with an intensity that felt like ice water in his veins. "Sergeant Chen, isn't it? Your reputation precedes you. I look forward to working closely with you during the negotiations." The implicit threat in those words was unmistakable, but Marcus forced himself to remain calm. "Likewise, Commander." As they finally reached the Villani quarters, Marcus felt the full weight of their predicament settling on his shoulders. Not only were they dealing with the normal pressures of crucial diplomatic negotiations, but they were also surrounded by enemies who had somehow infiltrated the very heart of the peace conference. "Corvash Thalon," the princess said to her guards as soon as they were alone in the suite, "I want security sweeps of these quarters every 4 hours. Trust no one who isn't part of our original delegation." "What about the sergeant?" Corvash asked, his mandibles clicking with agitation. The princess looked at Marcus for a long moment, her amber eyes unreadable. "Sergeant Chen has proven his loyalty beyond question. He has my complete trust." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude mixed with overwhelming responsibility. After all their trials, the princess was finally placing her faith in him, and he was determined not to let her down. "Your Highness," he said formally, "I recommend we establish communication with the Terran delegation and inform them of Commander Voss's true identity." "No," the princess said firmly. "If Voss has successfully infiltrated the official delegation, we don't know how many others might be compromised. Until we understand the full extent of the conspiracy, we trust no one." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of diplomatic preparation and security planning. Marcus worked with the princess to identify potential threats and escape routes while maintaining the facade of normal pre-negotiation activities. The opening ceremony was scheduled for the following evening, with representatives from 47 different species gathering in the station's Great Assembly Hall. It would be the largest gathering of its kind in galactic history, and the security challenges were enormous. Marcus was reviewing the Assembly Hall's layout when the princess approached him with a troubled expression. "I've been thinking about our discovery," she said quietly. "The predecessor site. What if that's what this is really about?" "What do you mean?" "The timing of the attack, Voss's presence here. What if the peace negotiations are just a cover? What if someone is using this conference to position themselves for a grab at predecessor technology?" Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. "The site is in the Veil system, which is currently disputed territory between human and Villani space. If someone could manipulate the negotiations to gain control of that region, they would have exclusive access to technology that could reshape the galaxy," the princess finished. "Technology worth any price, including war." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as station security announced a general alert. "All diplomatic personnel remain in your quarters," came the announcement. "Station security is responding to a potential threat. This is not a drill." Marcus immediately moved to the suite's communication console, trying to raise station security for more information. What he found chilled him to the bone. The entire security network had been compromised, with unauthorized access codes being used throughout the system. "They're not responding to a threat," he told the princess grimly. "They are the threat." As if summoned by his words, the lights in their quarters suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness broken only by the red glow of emergency lighting. "Everyone stay calm," Marcus called out, drawing his weapon and activating its light attachment. Corvash Thalon, defensive positions. The Villani guards moved with practiced efficiency, taking up positions to cover the suite's entrances while Morvek crouched behind an overturned table. "Can we reach the emergency evacuation routes?" the princess asked. Marcus checked the corridor outside through the suite's security monitors. Negative. Armed figures moving through the station. They're wearing station security uniforms, but they're definitely not legitimate peacekeepers. How many? Unknown, but probably the entire security force has been replaced or compromised. The princess was quiet for a moment, then spoke with the calm certainty that Marcus was beginning to recognize as her decision-making voice. "Sergeant, what's the most defensible position on this station?" Marcus considered the question, running through the station schematics he'd memorized. "The assembly hall.
It's designed to withstand attack, has its own life support systems, and multiple escape routes. Then that's where we need to go. Your Highness, with respect, the Assembly Hall is exactly where they'll expect us to head.
It's where all the other delegations will be gathering. Exactly, the princess said with a slight smile that was equal parts determination and recklessness. They're counting on us running and hiding. Instead, we're going to warn everyone and organize a defense. Marcus stared at her.
You want to start a firefight in the middle of the peace conference? I want to save the peace conference, she corrected. If Voss and his people succeed in whatever they're planning, there won't be any negotiations to save. Marcus found himself grinning despite their desperate situation.
Your Highness, that is either the bravest or the most insane plan I've ever heard. Why can't it be both? They gathered their equipment and prepared to move out, with Marcus taking point and the Volani guards providing rear security.
The corridors outside were eerily quiet, lit only by emergency lighting that cast long shadows and created perfect hiding spots for potential ambushes. They encountered the first group of fake security personnel near the central hub. Marcus spotted them first. 3 figures in station uniforms moving with military precision rather than the relaxed patrol pattern of actual peacekeepers. Contact, he whispered into his communicator, then opened fire. The ensuing firefight was brief but vicious. The enemy returned fire with military-grade weapons that had no business being on a diplomatic station. But Marcus and the Volani guards had the advantage of superior training and defensive positions. When the shooting stopped, 3 bodies lay sprawled in the corridor. Check their equipment, Marcus ordered as they approached the fallen enemies. What they found confirmed his worst suspicions. The weapons were top-of-the-line military hardware, and each of the fake security officers carried identification that showed them to be members of various legitimate security forces from across the galaxy. Professional soldiers, Corvash observed grimly. This is not a simple criminal operation. No, Marcus agreed. This is a military coup disguised as a security response. They reached the assembly hall to find chaos. Diplomats from dozens of species huddled in frightened groups while station personnel tried to maintain order with decreasing success. The hall's security barriers had been activated, sealing everyone inside, officially for their protection, though Marcus suspected the real purpose was to keep them all in one place. There, the princess pointed to a raised platform where several human figures in diplomatic uniforms were addressing the crowd. Commander Voss. Marcus studied the scene and realized what was happening. Voss wasn't just leading a terrorist attack. He was taking control of the entire peace conference. By positioning himself as the senior security official responding to a crisis, he could manipulate the negotiations to serve his own purposes. He's going to use the threat of continued attacks to force through whatever agreements he wants, Marcus said, probably including territorial concessions in the Veil system. Not if we stop him first, the princess replied. They made their way through the crowd of frightened diplomats trying to reach the platform where Voss was consolidating his control. Marcus noticed several other suspicious figures positioned throughout the hall, more of the military infiltrators masquerading as security personnel. They were halfway across the hall when Voss spotted them. Ah, Princess Zarathis, the commander's amplified voice carried across the entire assembly. I'm so glad you made it safely. Please, join me on the platform where we can ensure your continued protection. It was phrased as a request, but the armed figures moving to surround them made it clear that refusal wasn't an option. Marcus counted at least a dozen hostiles positioned throughout the hall, with more likely stationed outside. Even with his training and the Volani guard skills, the odds were hopeless in a direct confrontation. But as they approached the platform, Marcus noticed something that gave him hope. The assembly hall's communication system was still active, and if he could reach the control booth, Your Highness, he whispered as they climbed the steps to the platform. When I give the signal, create a distraction. Any distraction? The princess nodded slightly, understanding immediately. They reached the platform where Voss waited with a triumphant smile. Your Highness, Sergeant Chen. So good of you to join our little gathering. What do you want, Voss? The princess asked directly. What I've always wanted, Voss replied. Justice for the crimes committed against my people and security for the future of human space. By taking control of a peace conference? By ensuring that the terms of any peace are dictated by strength rather than weakness, Voss corrected. Your father will agree to our territorial demands,
or these negotiations will end in the same violence that has plagued our species for decades. Marcus saw his chance as Voss turned to address the crowd. The communication control booth was just 20 meters away, but he needed a distraction to reach it undetected. As if reading his mind, the princess stepped forward and spoke in a voice that carried clearly across the hall. "I have an announcement for all assembled delegates," she said, her royal bearing commanding attention even in these dire circumstances. "I have discovered information that changes everything we thought we knew about this conflict." Voss spun around, his cybernetic eye focusing on her with laser intensity. "Your Highness, perhaps this isn't the appropriate time." "On the contrary," the princess interrupted, "this is exactly the right time. You see, Commander Voss and his people aren't just terrorists or criminals. They're treasure hunters." Marcus used the moment of confusion to slip away from the platform, moving through the crowd toward the communication booth while all eyes were on the princess. "Treasure hunters, Your Highness?" one of the alien delegates called out. "Oh yes," the princess continued, her voice carrying that musical quality that made her words impossible to ignore. "They're after predecessor technology, ancient weapons and devices that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy." The crowd murmured with growing excitement. The predecessors were legendary among all spacefaring species, the mysterious ancients who had vanished eons ago, leaving behind tantalizing hints of technology far beyond current understanding. Marcus reached the communication booth and began working frantically at the controls. If he could override the security lockouts and broadcast a message to the Federation fleet, "That's enough," Voss snarled, raising his weapon toward the princess. "You don't understand the forces you're meddling with." "I understand perfectly," the princess replied calmly. "The question is, what are you prepared to do about it?" Marcus found what he was looking for, an emergency override that would punch their signal through the station's compromised communication grid. His fingers flew across the controls as he prepared to broadcast a distress call that would bring every Federation ship in the sector racing to their rescue. But as he reached for the final activation key, a hand grabbed his wrist in an iron grip. "I don't think so, Sergeant." Marcus turned to find himself face to face with one of Voss's soldiers, the man's weapon trained directly on his chest. The trap was closing, and Marcus realized that their desperate gamble might have just doomed them all.